Timecop. A novel by S.D. Perry, based on a screenplay by Mark Verheiden. Story by Mike Richardson and Mark Verheiden. This is a Pliskin audiobook presentation. Prologue. Gainesville, Georgia, 1863. When he first heard the dull, splashing sounds of the approaching horses, he mistook it for more rain. It had been pouring buckets off and on all morning. His hat and clothes were soaked, and it was still coming down, even though the thunder was now in the distance, and the rain had eased off some. He cupped one hand around a cold and dripping ear, and managed to dump a brimful of chill water into his eyes. With the move. Jesus! He scowled and blinked it away. God damn weather! God damn assignment! After a moment he made out the creaking of the wagon and the low murmur of conversation. "Took you long enough," he said under his breath. His voice was easily covered by the rain, even slackened as it was now to a more gentle sound. He was really starting to hate. All fucking morning, he'd been crouched here in the downpour, had watched it trickle from the curved brim of his hat and off the ends of his dark, stringy hair until he thought he'd go crazy. There was nothing else to do in the middle of nowhere, hunched over in the thin brush next to a rutted, mucky trail on the grayest morning in the history of the world. Nothing to do but wait. Time. Well, he had plenty of that. He straightened slowly, wincing at the stiffness in his legs. Tiny rivulets of water coursed down the folds in his long coat and splattered against his boot heels. He checked his weapons for the 10th time and then stepped out onto the muddy road. Almost over, finally. Another minute passed before the group rounded the bend in front of him. They looked as gray as he felt, their tattered uniforms and scruffy faces blending into the heavy sky. 4 soldiers on horseback, rallied loosely around a beaten-up buckboard. Another Confederate sat on the wagon's splintery perch and shook the reins tiredly, urging the 2 sopping horses onward. The driver was in a trance. He didn't pull up until the team was almost on top of the waiting man. He felt a smile twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Mornin'," he drawled. This part of it at least was going to be fun. The soldier driving the wagon wore a casual face, but there was a trace of apprehension nestled there. The other soldiers sat up straighter in their saddles. Good. "Mornin'," the driver returned easily enough. "Y'all mind moving aside?" He stood and stared at the Confederate, feeling the adrenaline build. "You know what I think?" He licked at his wet lips. "No, sir. I can't rightly say that I do. I think you got yourself a shipment of gold in that buckboard. Gold that you're bringing to General Lee." He watched, pleased, as all of their wary faces tightened, and 2 of the horse riders shot alarmed glances at each other. They searched the bushes with quick looks, trying to see if he had accomplices. Their hands drifted toward their guns. Nobody was supposed to know about this. That was why such a small detail had been sent. The theory was they'd sneak by a lot easier if they weren't noticed, if they seemed to be just another wagon of food being smuggled in. Stupid hicks. They had no idea. "Just who might you be?" The driver's voice was sharp now. Why, I'm a friend of the Confederacy. The urge to grin was almost too much to resist as he watched the driver consider his answer. More or less. Well, why don't y'all show just how good a friend you are by stepping aside? He kept his face straight. I'd be most happy to. Except first, I'd be much obliged if y'all would move away and give me that gold. See, I have a need for it, and you're going to lose this war anyway. What's the point in throwing good money after bad? The soldiers looked at him, at one another, and at him again. One of the front horsemen scanned the bushes again, a puzzled frown on his gray face. No place to hide ambushers, he'd be thinking. This fool in the road must be crazy from the rain. He must be insane to try this, unless he had help. No, it's just me. All by my lonesome. Stupid fucking hicks. I don't believe I heard you correct, the driver said, his eyebrows raised. I think you did, he said. I'd like you to give me that gold now. I'll take it somewhere, it'll do some good. He tilted his head slightly, sending a fresh torrent of rain from his brim. He gave them a little grin, showed the artfully designed smile, complete with brown tobacco stains, and a gap where his right eye tooth ought to be. But his socks were wet, and his feet were turning into fleshy prunes, and he wanted to get on with it. The driver frowned. Listen, mister, it ain't very nice out here, as you can plainly see. He nodded randomly at the surroundings with his chin, not taking his eyes off of the stranger. There are 5 of us. I don't know what you think you're up to, except if you don't move now, I'd just as soon kill you as not. One of the riders cracked an uneasy grin and moved his hand to the flap of the holster covering his sidearm. The driver went on. You want to die in this miserable weather. That's your choice. He couldn't contain it any longer, not in the face of such pathetic cockiness. It was unfair, knowing what was going to happen. Wet as it was, their guns probably wouldn't even go off. A huge smile spread across his face. I'm asking you one more time, he said. You gonna give me the gold? Last chance. You can still just ride away. The driver shrugged, his lips pursed, and reached for his rifle. All of the riders went for their guns. And he jerked his coat open, pulled his weapons, and started firing. He had Uzis, 2 of them, each with a 30-round magazine full of 9mm. The Israelis designed their machinery to work in any kind of weather. Work it did. The horses shrieked and reared as the bullets smacked into the flesh of the soldiers. The burst of man-made thunder was absurdly loud in the rainy afternoon, deafening. Blood sprayed across the mucky ground as the 5 men screamed, cut down, chopped apart by the automatic weapons fire. Their final expressions of shock and fear were blown into bloody pieces, along with the rest of their fragile bodies, their still-reaching hands, their ropey innards, all of it splattered to the soupy mud. He held the triggers back until the submachine guns ran dry. It was over too quickly for him, but after a few seconds there was nothing left to take down. Men, horses, they were all history. He lowered the Uzis. Thin tendrils of smoke wafted from the barrels and disappeared into the rain. He was dimly aware that he was still grinning, trickling drops of water running down his face, over his fake teeth. In front of him, spread out like some bizarre feast, lay the slaughtered men and animals. Shattered, steaming bodies poked up from the muck at odd angles. They'd never had a prayer. It was a bloodbath. God, a bath. I'd give my left nut for a hot bath right now. There was a thought. As he surveyed the lifeless scene, he felt a chill run up his aching spine, followed closely by a need to sneeze. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, and his face was hot to the touch. Great. Just fucking great. A head cold from sitting in the goddamn rain. He'd better get a fat bonus for this one. The skies opened up again. The rain renewed its onslaught as he stepped forward. The wind gusted and drove at him the heaviest cloudburst so far. Figured. Jesus. He spat in disgust and went to look at the gold. One. Senate Oversight Committee Room, Washington, D.C., September 2nd, 1994. McComb watched the older senator carefully, had watched him indirectly from the minute he stalked into the boardroom, 5 minutes later than everyone else. The man fascinated him. Harlan Utley, in spite of his rumpled suit and his consistent pretense of an inability to be punctual, was a powerful figure. He had been in the business for a long time, and he knew how to cover his ass, and how to get rid of his enemies. All good things to know. Of course, the young Senator McComb himself was no slouch, but he was still new here, and he knew he would do well to study with caremen like Utley. The old man didn't fuck around, and he didn't wear the same air of skepticism that the others wore, tapping their pencils and raising their eyebrows as quiet seconds ticked by. Skeptical because the copied folders that lay in front of them were full of techno garble that implied, well, what sounded like a joke. McComb glanced at his watch. Several thousands of dollars worth of Swiss machinery, though it didn't look it, and allowed a flash of annoyance to cross his cultured features. He was going to miss part of the fundraiser being thrown by Optic X. He had a long ladder to climb before he had anything like Utley's clout, and he didn't like missed opportunities, not when it came to collecting fat corporate money. Money was what made the political world go around, and you could never have too much of it. This meeting wouldn't have been called if it wasn't important, but Spoda was keeping a room full of very busy people waiting, and from what McComb knew, Spoda was too smart to piss off men like Utley, unless he also had a very big hammer. That's how things worked in D.C. You either kicked ass or kissed it, depending on how much clout you had. And even a man with the president's ear had to pay attention to the rules, or he'd be looking for a job real damn quick. That's what it was really all about. Clout. Power. Whose nuts you had in your pocket, and what you could make him do to get them back. And speak of the devil. George Spota, special assistant to the president, walked into the room and to the head of the long conference table. Right behind him was another man who looked familiar to McComb, although he couldn't quite place him. Obviously, a nobody, with that hard-edged look that the young senator associated with cops and judges. Did Spota need a bodyguard these days? Spota arranged his lean body in his seat and raised his dark face to meet the waiting stares. The man was immaculate as usual, but there was something about his manner today that made him seem flustered. His eyes seemed particularly intense behind his rimless glasses. McComb felt a stir on the back of his neck, an atavistic sense of danger. This was something big. Could it be that the information packet he had skimmed might possibly be real? Spota started right in. Good afternoon, gentlemen. The president is very grateful for your time here. His low voice was clear and deceptively amiable. Believe me, this is a matter of the utmost importance, and I cannot stress too much the utmost secrecy. Why don't you cut to the chase, George? Everyone looked to McComb's end of the table at Senator Utley. You're here to ask the committee for money, so why don't you just come out and ask for it? It wasn't a question. Utley didn't like to waste time either. Then tell us why the hell you think there's a prayer you'll get it. Macomb and the others looked back at Spoda, who smiled winningly, like watching a finals match at Wimbledon. The up-and-coming young bull against the wily old stud. Even being this close was dangerous, and you sure didn't want to get between these two. You'd get gored and then stomped into the mud. Thank you for the advice, Senator. I'm going to ask for money, and there's no doubt in my mind you're going to give it to me. A grin appeared on Utley's lined face. We'll see about that, won't we, George? Macomb felt that stir again, a warning from the small internal voice that had gotten him this far. Spoda was sure of himself, no doubts. He had to be, because squeezing Utley for money was like squeezing a rock. How could he be so certain? He had to have a real big hammer. Macomb had a sudden feeling the OpticX fundraiser he was missing was going to be peanuts compared to what was going down here. He could smell it. Does the name Hans Kleindost mean anything to you? Spoda looked at each of the senators. If anybody recognized the name, it didn't show. It rang no bells with Macomb, and he knew anybody who was anybody in D.C. I didn't think so. He's a friend of ours, a physicist who just happened to have won the Nobel 20 years ago. He fixed his eyes on Utley. And for the past few years, his field of research has been time travel. Utley snorted. Time travel. If Spoda had said he'd brought back Jesus and was going to put on a demonstration of walking on water down in front of the Washington Monument, Utley's contempt and obvious disbelief couldn't have been any stronger. Time travel. The senator glanced at Macomb and the other senators, gave them a grin. Well, beam me up, Scotty. Macomb grinned along with the others, including Spoda. Utley could get away with the jab, just as he could get away with calling Spoda George. Macomb wouldn't have dared the joke or the first name. Not yet. That's very funny, Senator. You want to know what's even funnier than that? Spoda was still smiling. Utley leaned over and gave Macomb a stage whisper aside. I get the feeling he's going to tell us. To Spoda, he said, Go ahead, George. Lay it on us. Spoda dropped the smile. The funny thing is, the good doctor, well, he actually did it. Macomb waited. The other senators shifted in their chairs, now wearing expressions that ran from mild amusement to open disbelief. Utley didn't twitch. He was a master poker player. They said if he wanted to leave politics, he could go to Vegas or Atlantic City or the Mississippi casinos and make a fortune. At the game. He knew a bluff when he heard one, and from his face, it seemed he didn't think Spoda had the balls to try it on him. Spoda went on. I thought that might get your attention. He gestured with one manicured hand at the table. The technology is all in the folders in front of you, although you probably won't understand it any better than I can. It's got to do with the theory of relativity and the effects of time as you approach the speed of light. Spoda half shrugged. He was no scientist. It all came from particle accelerators that were first built in the 80s. The idea is, you can go backward in time by going so fast you can arrive before you left, if you take a shortcut through hyperspace. Spoda paused for effect, which was unnecessary. Macomb was riveted, the possibilities already starting to turn in his mind. You have to move in space as well, so you don't wind up in the middle of something or the middle of nowhere. The Earth isn't in the same place it was yesterday or last year. but it can all be calculated with computers. You can pick a spot in time and a place, and within certain limitations you can put something or someone there. Apparently the reach is still somewhat limited, only a couple of 100 years. So, no dinosaur hunts or visits to Golgotha. Of course, as you might suspect, it gets real tricky. Time travel. Things like the grandfather paradox. If you go back in time and change something, it's serious. It could be catastrophic. It's like throwing a stone in a pond and it causes ripples in the water. Only it's ripples in time, and they can be disastrous. If someone wanted to go back and kill Hitler, say, which would seem like an appropriate use for such a device, it might cause a chain reaction of events that could alter, even destroy, mankind. Spoda leaned forward, his dark features grim. This sounds like science fiction, but trust me, it is all real. From a million miles away, Macomb heard Utley speak. That's some pretty far-fetched stuff we're talking about here, George. And real big. Spoda nodded. Couldn't be bigger. The problem is, gentlemen, the cat is already out of the bag. The technology is there. Our pal Kleindast may not be the only one who has figured this out. There are others working along the same lines, and that is where you, my good senators, come in. He glanced at the man who had accompanied him into the meeting, and then continued. The short, dark-haired stranger raised his chin slightly. He hadn't spoken a word yet, but his part was apparently coming up. If you will give me for a moment that this technology works, then you will also see that the government of the United States will, as a result, have a major responsibility, gentlemen. Macomb didn't see what he was driving at, but Utley did. He was a sharp old blade. Control, he said. Exactly. The cat is out of the bag. We can't have it jumping into the pond making waves, now can we? We need a watchdog to make sure it goes where we want and doesn't do what we don't want. Utley nodded. He saw something the rest of them didn't see. He had a mind sharp as a truckload full of razor blades. Macomb was no slouch in the thinking department either. He thought about it for a second, and it dawned on him what it was. Holy shit. Timecops, Spada said. We had to form a new agency to police this technology, to actually protect time from those who would alter it. Macomb nodded. It made sense. We are proposing an agency that we will call the Time Enforcement Commission, the TEC. This man seated next to me is Commander Eugene Matuzak of the DC Police Department. He is the president's choice to run the organization. Macomb allowed himself a flash of pride as Matuzak nodded politely to the senators. A cop. Bingo. Utley cleared his throat. How much is this going to cost? Spoda met his gaze. A lot. How much is a lot? More than a little, and less than too much. Macomb knew it was unlike Spoda to be so coy. He probably knew to the dime how much he wanted. This was going to be spendy. Macomb waited silently with the others, not letting his impatience show. He wouldn't speak until it was necessary. But he wanted to see this project get funded. Spoda continued with the pitch. Look, once people know how to do something, all it takes is money. Macomb nodded inwardly. Money was all. Utley frowned. This is not the best time for this. The economy is in crappy shape. Spoda interrupted. Excuse me, Senator, but whatever it costs will be cheap, given what might happen. You're too smart to believe otherwise. Suppose one of our foreign competitors goes back in time and invents the computer, or the airplane, or the automobile. You want to talk about the state of the economy. How about this one? Saddam Hussein finances a trip back to 1944, and Iraq becomes the first country to have the atomic bomb. The room went deathly still. You like that one, Spoda said. I can think of worse. Given a minute, you all can too. Utley's face was set, not revealing what was on his mind, but Spoda had to know he'd hit a sore spot with the old senator. Utley had wanted to bomb Iraq back to the Stone Age during the Gulf War, and he still wanted to have the CIA bump Hussein off. It's an interesting problem, Utley said. McComb watched the special assistant intently. What he said next would either cinch the deal or blow it, and McComb suddenly wanted it cinched tight. In fact, he had never wanted anything so badly. The possibilities bloomed like desert flowers after a rain. Time travel. A smart man could control the world, if he could control the past. Talk hard, Spoda. Try this one on for size. We think there's already been a ripple. 10 days ago, the CIA broke up an arms sale to a bunch of Middle Eastern terrorists in Hamburg. That's happened before, and ordinarily, that kind of news doesn't occupy much of the president's desk. What made this one different is the fact that the arms were purchased with gold bullion, and the gold bullion was marked with the date 1863, stamped property of the Confederate States of America. It appeared to have been freshly minted. So what? You got yourself a Civil War buff. What does that prove? Utley said. Guy pours some gold into a mold. He can mark it any way he wants, can he? Or, if they have the technology, they can go back in time and collect it, somebody at the other end of the table said. McComb wasn't paying attention. He didn't catch who it was who spoke. Utley said, if that's what they did, maybe they just dug the stuff up and polished it. Gold doesn't go bad now, does it? That would be a lot easier to believe than what you're selling, George. Spoda dropped the other shoe. They did some sophisticated tests, Senator. I can't begin to tell you what they were, but the bottom line is, the gold was genuine Confederate bullion, produced exactly the same way as it was made more than 130 years ago, the way we measure time, but cast into ingots less than a year back. No mistake. That's a major contradiction. No way to explain it. Except one. You're sure? We have the smartest, the best minds in the world looking at it. We're sure. Somebody went back there and collected it. McComb looked at Utley, watched the older man's face, could almost see his mind churning behind it. Our committee would have exclusive jurisdiction over this project. Yes! He was going to go for it. Spoda's gaze bored into the senior senator. Yours and yours alone. No one can know about this. It's too dangerous. Look, somebody is going to get control of this. The rest of it didn't need saying. Us or them. Whoever they were these days. Utley nodded. All right, George. I hope to hell this isn't like that bullshit Star Wars program. But if you can put it down in top secret black and white so I can show it around to the right people, I think you'll probably get your money. He didn't even ask how much. Utley looked around the table, studying each of the members' faces. McComb was ready. Who wants to subchair the oversight on this sucker? Trick question. If this was some kind of science fiction fairy story, being involved with it could be major ammunition for an opponent come next re-election campaign. Ladies and gentlemen, the incumbent senator believes in time travel. I wonder, does he also believe in Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, and the Easter Bunny? Little bitty green men from Mars. Jesus, it would be worse than getting caught in bed with a trio of hookers. But if it was real... McComb tilted his head slightly, never taking his eyes off of Spoda. "I'd like to take a crack at it," he said casually. "Ah, young Senator McComb." "Yes, why not?" Utley smiled at Spoda. "Oh, you'll like him, George. He's very much like you, except his dorsal fin is a little bigger." McComb finally grinned as he stared down at the file of papers in front of him. Coming from Utley, that meant a lot. And these men didn't know it yet. But if this was legit, they had just handed him a golden key card to the fucking world. He could smile at that.